She needs to move. That seat is mine. I was already sitting when she said it. Boarding wasn't even done yet. People were still putting bags up. The engine wasn't on. And she was standing in the aisle, blocking everyone, pointing at me like I had stolen something. That's first class, she snapped. You don't belong there. I looked up at her slowly, calm. No rush. My name is on the ticket. She gave a dry laugh, the kind that says she already decided the story in her head. Sweetheart, they sometimes make mistakes at the counter. Just take your seat in the back. People around us started whispering. Phone slightly raised. A man across the aisle watched like he was waiting for a show. I didn't move. She leaned closer. I paid full price for this seat. I always sit here. I know the crew. The flight attendant came over. Yun. Polite smile. Tension in her eyes. Is there a problem, ma'am? Yes, Karen said fast. He's in my seat. The attendant checked her tablet, looked at me, then at Karen. Ma'am, your seat is 3C. Karen's face tightened. No. I changed it. I called yesterday. The attendant checked again. I don't see that. Karen crossed her arms. So now you're saying he paid more than me. There it was. That tone, like the idea offended her more than the seat itself. I stayed quiet, just watched. She looked at me again, up and down, judging. He probably got upgraded by mistake. It happens. The guy across the aisle muttered. This is wild. Karen turned around and snapped, mind your business. The flight attendant tried to calm things down. Ma'am, if you could please take your assigned seat, we need to close the doors. Karen didn't move. Instead, she pulled out her phone. I want the gate agent. Right now. The aisle was fully blocked now. A line of passengers behind her. Someone sighed loudly. A baby started crying near the back. She pointed at me again. I will not sit in coach while he takes my seat. The flight attendant glanced at me, quiet question in her eyes. I just nodded slightly, still calm. Karen smirked. See? He won't even talk, because he knows. 5 minutes later, the gate agent stepped onto the plane. Tall, serious, not smiling. What seems to be the issue? Karen turned dramatic instantly. I was assigned 1A. He refused to move. I need this fixed. The agent looked at the tablet, then looked at me. Then something changed in his face. Not confusion, recognition. Karen noticed it too. The agent stepped back slightly and spoke clearly. Ma'am, you need to step into the aisle. She blinked. Excuse me? His voice got louder. Professional. Firm. Escort the pilot. The cabin went silent. Dead silent. Karen frowned. What? Two uniformed crew members appeared at the front entrance. Not rushing, just waiting. The agent gestured toward me. Sir? Thank you for your patience. Karen's mouth slowly opened. I stood up calmly. Not angry, not smiling. Just steady. And that's when she realized. The man she tried to remove from first class was the one flying the plane. Karen's face lost all color. You're the pilot, she said, but it didn't sound like a question. It sounded like her world slipping. I picked up my cap from the seat pocket and placed it on my head slowly. The silver wings caught the cabin light. No rush, no drama. Yes, ma'am, I said quietly. I am. A soft murmur moved through first class. Someone actually whispered. No way. The gate agent didn't look amused anymore. Ma'am, you need to return to your assigned seat immediately. You're delaying departure. Karen looked around like she was waiting for someone to fix this for her. No one did. But he didn't say anything. She snapped. He just sat there. I looked at her evenly. You didn't ask. That line hung in the air. The flight attendant pressed her lips together to stop a smile. Karen's confidence cracked a little, but not fully. Well, how was I supposed to know? You don't look like. She stopped herself. Too late. The cabin got quiet again. Not shocked this time. Just aware. The gate agent's tone changed. Sharper now. Ma'am. Karen swallowed. I just meant. I know what you meant, he said calmly. Behind her. A businessman shook his head. Unbelievable. Karen straightened her back, trying to regain control. Fine. This is ridiculous anyway. I'll take 3C, but I will be filing a complaint. I stepped aside slightly so she could pass. She brushed by me without looking, but as she moved, I leaned in just enough so only she could hear. You still might want to switch flights. She paused. What? I gave her a calm look. You said you didn't trust the airline's mistakes. Her jaw tightened. She walked to 3C stiffly and sat down hard. The door finally closed. The tension didn't. As I stepped into the cockpit, my co-pilot Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Everything good out there?" "Just a seating issue," I said. He smirked. "She the one in 3C?" "Yep." Marcus laughed under his breath. "Oh, this'll be interesting." I strapped in and went through the pre-flight checklist. Convos, steady hands. Outside the cockpit, the plane pushed back from the gate. Everything normal, or at least it looked that way. 10 minutes later, just before takeoff, the cabin phone rang. The lead flight attendant's voice came through, tight. "Captain, we have a situation." I felt it instantly. "What kind of situation?" "It's the passenger in 3C." "Of course." "What now?" "She's telling other passengers that you shouldn't be flying this plane." Marcus looked at me. I kept my voice even. "On what grounds?" There was a small pause. "She's saying she feels unsafe." The word sat heavy. "And safe." Marcus let out a slow breath. "You've got to be kidding." I didn't respond right away, because I knew something Karen didn't. Something she couldn't see from seat 3C. "Is she refusing to sit?" I asked. "No, but she's asking for another captain." I almost smiled. "Another captain?" Marcus leaned back in his seat. "Does she know?" "No," I said quietly. "She doesn't." The flight attendant lowered her voice. "Captain, should we remove her?" I looked straight ahead at the runway lights lining up in front of us, the engines humming, the weight of 200 lives behind me, and one very loud passenger in 3C. "Not yet," I said calmly, because Karen had just made a very big mistake. She didn't just question a seat, she questioned the wrong pilot. And she had no idea who else was on this aircraft, watching everything. The plane was still holding short of the runway, and the second call came in. "Captain," the lead attendant said, her voice lower now. "She's recording. She's telling people the airline put them at risk." Marcus looked at me. "That's not just drama anymore." I knew that. False claims in the air weren't small things. Words like unsafe could ground flights, cause investigations, cost jobs. I pressed the button. "Is she threatening anyone?" "No. But she's telling passengers she'll sue if we take off." I let a slow breath out. "All right," I said. "Bring her forward." Marcus turned toward me. "You sure?" "Yes." A few minutes later, there was a knock on the cockpit door. Karen stepped in, chin high, phone still in her hand. "This is highly inappropriate," she began immediately. "I do not feel comfortable flying under these conditions." I looked at her directly. "What conditions, ma'am?" She hesitated for half a second. "You flying?" Marcus leaned back in his seat, silent. I kept my tone calm. "You're questioning my qualifications?" "I'm questioning the airline's judgment," she corrected quickly. "This feels unprofessional." Unprofessional, because I didn't argue about a seat, because I didn't look like what she expected. I nodded once. "How many flights have you taken with this airline?" She blinked. "What?" "Just answer." "Many." "And how many incidents have you experienced?" She crossed her arms. "That's not the point." "It is," I said softly. She opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, the cockpit door opened slightly. The senior flight supervisor stepped inside. Not a flight attendant, not a gate agent, a supervisor. He had been in the cabin the whole time, watching. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "we've reviewed the situation." She looked relieved. "Good. Then you understand." "Yes," he interrupted. "We do." Her smile started forming. Then he continued. "And due to your false safety claims, recording of crew without consent, and disruption of federal operations, you have two options." Her smile disappeared. "Option 1, he said clearly. "You return to seat 3C, remain silent, and this flight continues." "And option 2, she asked stiffly. "You are removed from the aircraft and placed on a no-fly review list pending investigation." The words hit hard. Even Marcus looked impressed. Karen's grip tightened on her phone. "You can't be serious." "I am," he replied calmly. "This cockpit crew includes one of our highest-rated captains, decorated, senior clearance, federal commendation." She looked at me again. For the first time, there was uncertainty. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. The supervisor continued. "Captain Rahman has over 12,000 flight hours, 0 incidents, military cross-training, emergency command certify." Her eyes flickered. "Military." There it was. "You didn't tell me that," she muttered. "You didn't ask." I said quietly again. Marcus almost laughed but held it in. Karen's confidence was draining fast now. She looked smaller than she did in the aisle earlier. I just wanted transparency, she tried. You accused him of being unsafe, the supervisor replied. In front of passengers. That's not transparency. Silence. The engines hummed steadily. The runway lights blinked in the distance. Finally, she lowered her phone. Fine, I'll sit. The supervisor nodded. Good choice. She stepped out of the cockpit without another word. The door sealed. Marcus exhaled. That escalated. I nodded. We're not done. He raised an eyebrow. You think she push again? I know she will. We taxied into position. Cleared for takeoff. As the engines roared and the plane lifted off the ground, the tension didn't fade. It just shifted. 30 minutes into the flight, we were stable at cruising altitude when the lead attendant called again. This time, her voice wasn't tense. It was controlled. Captain, she's telling passengers you were removed from duty once. I blinked. What? She says she Googled you. Marcus stared at me. That's not possible. It isn't, I said flatly. I pressed the button. Is she spreading it loudly? Yes. A few passengers looked concerned. I felt something change in my chest. Not anger. Resolve. She's making a defamation claim midair, Marcus said quietly. Exactly. I made a decision. Prepare the cabin announcement channel, I told the attendant. 2 minutes later, I pressed the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. The cabin fell quiet instantly. We're cruising smoothly at 37,000 feet. Weather ahead is clear, and we're on schedule. Normal. Steady. Then I added calmly. I've been informed there are concerns regarding the flight crew. Let me assure you personally, I have never been removed from duty, suspended, or cited in my career. Pause. I served 8 years in the Air Force before commercial aviation. My record is public, clean, verified. Another pause. If any passenger feels unsafe, you are welcome to speak directly with the senior supervisor on board. The message was clear. Without saying her name, without raising my voice. When I released the mic, Marcus looked at me. That was smooth. I don't fight loud, I said. I fight clear. 10 minutes later, the attendant called again, but this time, she was trying not to laugh. You won't believe this. What now? She's refusing to make eye contact with anyone. I almost smiled. What changed? The passenger next to her. Who is it? Retired federal judge. Marcus let out a low whistle. Of course. The attendant continued. He asked her very calmly if she understood the penalties for spreading false claims in a federal aircraft. I leaned back slightly, and she stopped talking. The cabin atmosphere shifted after that. Quiet, steady, but not over. An hour before landing, turbulence hit. Nothing dangerous, just rough air. The seatbelt sign dinged. I adjusted controls smoothly. Standard corrections. But turbulence does something interesting. It tests nerves. The attendant called again. She's panicking. I closed my eyes briefly. What is she saying? She's yelling that this is what she warned everyone about. Marcus shook his head slowly. I took the mic again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing mild turbulence. This is normal. Please remain seated. Then I added something simple. I am fully in control. The shaking eased within minutes. Smooth again. And when we landed, perfectly centered, clean touchdown. The entire cabin clapped. Not the polite kind, the real kind. I parked at the gate. Engines down. Checklist complete. Before opening the cockpit door, the supervisor looked at me. She probably try one last thing. I nodded. Let her. We stepped out. Passengers stood to exit. Many looked at me with respect. A few nodded. The retired judge shook my hand. Handled that well, Captain. Thank you, sir. And then Karen stood up from 3C. Her eyes met mine. No arrogance left, just something else. Frustration mixed with embarrassment. But she wasn't done. As we deplaned, 2 uniformed airport officers stood at the gate. Not random. Waiting. Karen froze when she saw them. The supervisor spoke calmly. Mom, please step aside. Her voice shook slightly. For what? For filing a false in-flight safety claim. Her face went pale. I didn't file anything. You contacted airline corporate mid-flight and flagged the aircraft. He replied. She had. During turbulence, trying to escalate, the officer stepped forward. We just need to ask a few questions. Passengers slowed down to watch. Phone subtly lifted again. Karen looked at me, desperate now. I was just concerned. I met her gaze. You weren't concerned, I said quietly. You were wrong. That hit harder than shouting ever could. The officer guided her gently toward a side area. No cuffs, no scene. Just consequences. As the last passenger left, Marcus clapped my shoulder. You attract chaos. I smiled faintly. No. Chaos finds entitlement. He laughed. But as we walked down the jet bridge, the supervisor caught up. There's one more thing. I stopped. What? She's not just a passenger. I frowned. Meaning, she's on the board of a regional travel association. I paused. And she just tried to threaten corporate leverage. There it was. The hidden power she thought she had. Marcus looked between us. So she thought she could pressure the airline. Yes. The supervisor said. She believed you'd be replaced. I let out a slow breath. She picked the wrong week. He nodded. Corporate already reviewed the cockpit audio. And they're promoting you. I stared at him. Promoting. International command route. Effective next month. Marcus blinked. You're serious? The supervisor smiled slightly. After today's handling? Very. I stood there quietly for a moment. Karen thought she could remove me from my own seat, from my own cockpit. Instead, she pushed the very thing that elevated me. As we walked toward crew exit, Marcus shook his head. She tried to get you grounded. I nodded once, and ended up launching me higher. Behind us, through the terminal glass, I saw Karen still speaking with officers. Small, angry, but powerless now. I didn't feel revenge. I felt something better. Balance. Because sometimes the loudest person in the room thinks volume is power. But real power, it stays calm. It waits, and when it speaks, it doesn't need to scream. Karen was still standing near the glass wall when I walked past with my crew bag. She wasn't yelling anymore. She wasn't pointing. She wasn't recording. She looked tired. One of the airport officers handed her a paper. She signed something quickly, clearly not reading all of it. Her confidence from the aisle gone. As I moved closer, she looked up. For a second, I thought she would start again. Blame the airline. Blame me. Blame the system. But she didn't. You embarrassed me, she said quietly. I stopped walking. No. I replied calmly. You did that yourself. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had no speech ready. No lines, no authority voice. I was just trying to protect myself, she muttered. From what? I asked. She didn't answer. Because there was no threat. There never was. There was only her assumption. The supervisor approached us again. Ma'am, due to today's disruption and false escalation, your frequent flyer privileges are suspended pending review. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. We can, he said evenly. And we did. That was the moment it fully hit her. Not when she lost the argument. Not when passengers stared. Not even when the officers arrived. It hit her when she realized her status. Her little badge of importance meant nothing here. She looked at me again. You could have just told me who you were. I held her gaze. You could have just asked. Silence. People walking around us. Announcements echoing through the terminal. Life moving on. Karen looked smaller than she had on that plane. Not because of me, because the world didn't bend. I thought, she started, then stopped. You thought what? I asked. That someone like you wouldn't be in 1A. There it was. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just honest. I nodded slowly. That's the problem. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She just looked down. Marcus came up behind me. Crew shuttles here. I gave Karen one last look. I didn't fight for my wings to argue over a seat, I said calmly. And I didn't serve this country to be told where I belong. That line stayed in the air. She swallowed hard. I guess I was wrong, she whispered. Yes, I said, you were. And then I walked away. No victory speech, no anger. Just quiet steps. As we stepped outside, the sun was setting over the runway. Orange light across the aircraft tails lined up in the distance. Marcus nudged me. You goat. I smiled slightly. Always. He shook his head. You know this will spread, right? Someone recorded everything. I shrugged. Let it. Because here's the truth. This was never about a seat. It wasn't about first class. It wasn't even about me. It was about what happens when someone thinks they own space that isn't theirs. When someone believes confidence equals control. When someone decides who belongs, based on nothing. Later that week, corporate called. Official apology. Commendation for professionalism. Promotion confirmed. International command. Digger aircraft. Longer routes. More responsibility. And one quiet note from the CEO. Thank you for representing the airline with dignity under pressure. I didn't celebrate loudly. I just went home. That night, I sat at the kitchen table while my daughter colored beside me. How was work? She asked. I smiled. Interesting. She looked up. Did you fly the big plane? Yes. Did you win? I thought about that. About Karen. About the clapping passengers. About the officers. About the look on her face when she realized she was wrong. Then I answered softly, no. Sweetheart, I just did my job, because that's the real twist. The loudest person in the room doesn't always win. The one who stays steady does. Karen demanded my first-class seat. She tried to question my uniform. She tried to shake my authority. She tried to ground my career. But she forgot one simple thing. You can't remove a pilot from his own cockpit, and you can't shake someone who knows exactly where he belongs. A month later, I walked through another airport. Different gate, different plane, international flight. As I stepped on board, a young boy in first class looked up at me with wide eyes. Are you the captain? I smiled. Yes, I am. He grinned. Cool. No judgment. No assumptions. Just respect. And as I settled into seat 1A before takeoff, I glanced out at the runway lights stretching into the distance. Calm. Steady. Ready. Because some people try to take your seat. Others try to take your name. But if you've earned your wings, no one can take your sky.